G'day guys, you're back with Miracle Max. In the workshop today we have an Audi Q5 R8 Quattro 2011 model with a 2-litre TDI engine, and that stands for turbocharged direct injection engine. Now what's it in for? Well, it's got a fuel smell and it's not nice. Several other workshops have had a look at it but they can't figure out what it is. So let's sort it out together. Fuel lines come on the driver's side, which here in Australia is the right hand side, as you can see there, but we have no trouble there. There's no leaks or anything, it's nice and dry, and yet they're complaining about the problem or the smell over that side. So the complaint is on the left hand side, and I've pulled the shielding off, or there's a plastic cover there, and believe it or not, there's nothing under there apart from your brake lines. Which is strange to have a fuel smell. Now I'm a little concerned about this hose here. I don't know what it is. It's thicker than the others. Could be carbon canister, I assume. It's most likely what it is, but once again I've traced it all the way to the front. There's no splits or wet marks on there. Okay, so I've put the other side back on. It looks like they've used some sort of underbody spray at some point. There's gooey stuff everywhere, so I've cleaned off the fuel tank in case there is any leakage from the tank itself, as in literal fuel leaking, but that looks okay to me. It was pretty dry. I put this cover back on. There was nothing inside there that was wet. It was all good, so I've got no problems there, but they're still complaining about this on the left hand side, and I must admit I did run it for a little while and it just smells right about here for some strange reason, right about the passenger side front, and I can't really isolate to where it's actually coming from. One thing that I forgot to do during my testing was to put the fuel cap on. Idiot, because these are a pressurized system. Now the fuel tank is under pressure. We may be able to see a leak. Who knows? Let's head underneath. Even though the smell was suggested to be on the passenger side, let's have a look along the driver's side. This is where the fuel lines are. There's our fuel tank, and you can probably see right now we've got a little bit of leakage there, people, and it's not good, that's for sure. Quite bad, in fact. So we really need to address that issue. That's quite dangerous. We've got some major drippage there, and we'll have a look at the floor. We can see it now. Simply because I put the fuel cap on, I really didn't think it through. You've got to copy what your customer does to actually find the fault. So, yep, I'll pull the covers off and maybe drop the tank. Look guys, to be honest here, I was just about to pull out the fuel tank. In fact, I actually started, but then I thought to myself, fuel pump? I wonder if the fuel pump's ever been replaced in this thing. So I did some research, and it's quite easy to access. Admittedly, this vehicle is a mum's car, lots of stuff in there, 3 kids, lots of stuff in the boot as well, but it's easier than pulling out the fuel tank. Once I remove the back seat, then I can take off that access panel to get to my fuel pump. Is there a fuel leak from the fuel pump itself or from the tank? So this will be an easy way to isolate it and then decide if I have to take the tank out at all or if it's just the fuel pump itself. So the back seat was a bit of a challenge to get out by itself. You do have to be quite aggressive with getting the seat, the base of the seat off, which comes off. Might just lay this down so you guys can see it. I'll push that back up. So these clips here are quite strong. They hold the base of the seat. You've got to get a screwdriver underneath here and just up and up on those two. And then you have 2 Allen keys in the front, or Torx bits I'd say. They go in the front there, and then in the back you have some big suckers there that hold the back in. Once you've got that out, then you've got a bit of a cable to battle with. I don't know where the cable goes, wouldn't have a clue, but I've just disconnected it off of here and taken it off the frame itself just to give me some more length, and then I can just fold it up onto the passenger side seat, the rear passenger side seat there. Just like that, so you don't have to physically remove it, and then you've got clear access to the port or the cover for the fuel pump. So let's pull that off next. Okay, the cover's off, and no, they're not after me. And yeah, that's obviously the leak there. I should have perhaps thought about that before I started to tackle the fuel tank itself. So it could be one of these connectors here. God, there's fuel all filled up into the electrical connections. That's pretty dangerous. This must be a non-return system. As you can see, there's only one hose here. So whether it's this hose or whether, don't know what that is, but it looks a bit scary. I'll have to really run it to find out where this fuel is actually coming from to determine if the pump itself needs replacement. I'd say it will, because it's probably got a cracked connector or something along those lines. Anyway, that's the fun of it all. Here's one for the books that I haven't seen before. Just check out the top of the fuel pump around about there when I turn the ignition on. Just hang on a sec. Okay, how pretty is that? We all love a waterfall, but maybe not so much like that. That's pretty dangerous, isn't it? That would have been squirting onto the top plate here. Of course, you can see the staining going onto the top of the tank and then dribbling down. This thing needs a new fuel pump. It's actually cracked around the top of the housing. Right, the fuel pump has been ordered. It's going to turn up tomorrow, but I want to get started on this thing here. One of the major problems with this particular pump is that every time you open a door or you turn on the ignition or anything, it primes. And of course we get our little waterfall happening, don't we? So what I want to do is disconnect that. Look, it's even perished the seal around here. I might have to put some contact adhesive just to hold it in place, because the fuel's got onto it. We don't like that. We'll put that aside. So what I want to do is get this connector off, of course, because that will stop the pump priming. Got a fair bit of fuel in there at the moment, so that's not a good thing. But we do want to get rid of that that connector there. I'm hoping, is that a lock in there? I'm hoping that it'll, yeah, it looks like a lock of some description. Hope the plastic hasn't been perished because of all that fuel that's been sitting in there, because that's certainly not good, is it? Okay, I've lifted up that little lock there. I'm hoping it's far enough away. Then there should be another connect or another tab that you push down, I'm hoping. Well, that really took some effort on my part. I did some extra research and it didn't seem to be any different to what I was doing. That little locking tab, that pink one here, needed to be pulled up. But of course it had been perished by the fuel. And it's the same with this fella here. This needs to be pushed in this direction, so you can lever against it that way and then pull it up. Now, as you can see, my little red locking tab is no more. She's history, mate. It's just broken off. And there's fuel absolutely everywhere. So I'm going to have to mop up this mess before I attempt to do, you know, the removal of the pump. So I want to be safe. Don't want all this mess sitting here while I'm working on it. Look, it's not perfect, but it's better than it was. I've got the main area of fuel out. And as you can see, this connector is still quite wet. So what I'm going to do is use some contact adhesive, contact and circuit board cleaner, oops, about there, and that should help, like a deoxit type thing. Hopefully that should get rid of any fuel issues in the connectors. We don't want any poor connections, do we? All right, might dry that off with some compressed air. Oh, that's part of the seal that's come out too. The seal is all perished. I found a bit in there before, this rubbery looking thing, so the seal's not real healthy either. I am of the opinion that this is the genuine original one. Down here it's got made in Germany written on it, and I think that's the little Volkswagen symbol. There's no Audi symbol, but it looks like there's a VW symbol right there. Our next step is to get this line off, or hose off. As I mentioned, there's only one hose or one pipe going in. This would be a return-less system, so it'll only have one. A return system has, well, return has a one coming back. These aren't too bad. You just push it that away, like a DOS. Press the little buttonage here, and give it a good heave-ho, and wiggle it backwards. And as long as there's no pressure in the system, you shouldn't have too much of an issue. Just force it back there, and I might put a rag on that, and then push it to one side. Our next step is this here ring. It's not a bad idea to use a screwdriver with a solid shaft all the way through, but if not, anything else will do. They've got little lines on here, so what I might actually do is just mark where it came up to. Let's have a look here. They do have an arrow here, and that seems to line up with that fella there. not that hard, it came off quite easy. So we need to get our wiring out the road, our pipe out the road. That ring should in fact get our ring off. Next section is that the entire module should come off. Should lift straight up. Sometimes they're spring loaded like that. And of course you need a tray or something, guys, because this will have some fuel in it, so you don't want to put that over the customer's car. Wow, this is getting awkward. Yeah, it's not meant to be like that. It's meant to be attached. Like that. Oh, they do have a secondary hose on there. Yeah, I might just have to pull it off here, I'm afraid. That's providing it'll come off. So these sometimes go either over to a secondary pump or a secondary section of the tank. This tank's quite long, and there might be another pickup up that end of the tank. This is sort of the starting area of the tank, and it goes forward. So perhaps this little pickup here goes to a connector for that, I don't know. You know, YouTube is a wonderful thing. It even helps me to get things right. I was so concerned about trying to get this pipe off that I didn't realise that all you've got to do is lift these two connectors. So you push them in together, that'll pop up. But before I do that, this little hose here needs to come off. And I believe if you press in either side, so here and here, it should in fact pop off, just like that. All right, so we've got this one off, that's out of the road, and you just push these two together and it pops off like that. So all that worry for nothing. I didn't have to pull that off. So we can now get the whole pump out, hopefully without spilling all the fuel everywhere. I have no idea what this is designed for, but it's got a hosey thing on the end, and that just clips onto the pump as you saw. So I guess I'll just pop it straight back on. I've been thinking to myself, why did this thing get this crack over here? You can see it's quite predominant, and you know, you saw it leaking out there before. But have a look, this round area here is just above this bloke here. This is the pressure regulator. Now this is a return less system, as I mentioned before, and that only has one pipe coming off it. So in other words, what will happen is the fuel goes off to the high pressure pump, and any excess pressure that's not needed at the time will be bled off through this pressure regulator, and that just gets dumped back into the fuel tank. Now if this fella here got stuck at any stage, that would obviously build pressure in this little bulb area. It's like a little accumulator, it's called. And who knows, perhaps the plastic had a weak spot at this point and the pressure was too much for it and it cracked, I don't know. Or perhaps it was just a manufacturer fault, not sure. But the point is, there is my crack right there. Fuel pump needs to be replaced. It's coming tomorrow, it'll be finished tomorrow. So I've just put some contact adhesive on that rubber seal that goes around the access panel and holding it in place with some clamps. That should dry off nicely while I do the fuel pump or change over the new fuel pump. The only brand that I could get quickly was Fuel Miser. I don't have a problem with them, I've used them before. Part number there, as you can see, is a FPE 834. Hopefully it's the right one. Let's just compare the two. The two appear to be the same at the top. Same connectors, electrically it looks the same, so no probs there. Going down, it looks the same sort of configuration. We've got our pressure regulators there. I don't know if you can see them, just slide them forward carefully. So our pressure regulators, those silver looking things down there, they're the same. They also give you another fella like this one. They even give you a new one of those, so that's pretty cool. And the float is disconnected from it, but they give you a new float as well. So that's not a bad kit. It's everything related to the fuel pump, so that's really good. It's not a bad kit. As long as it works, it shouldn't be too hard to put in, but as long as it works, that's good. Of course, the only thing I will need to change over is this seal here. You don't get that in there. So that seal will be transferred over here. Should be able to just stretch it over the top. Pop him onto there, she should be all good. And of course, one other thing I did notice that they haven't included is the big crack in the top. But hey, We don't want that anyway, do we? We want the new item to make it work and stop that little fuel fountain that was gushing out the top there, making a big mess and a big smell. So let's pop it in. Of course, when replacing a fuel pump, it's super important to make sure that the system is clean. Now, I'm not overly concerned about this one because it wasn't a fuel pump failure per se. It was a crack in the housing, but I have had a really good look inside there to make sure there's no greeblies floating around, and I'm happy that it's nice and clean in there. So I can now put in my new pump. I've also made sure that this rim here is nice and clean, with the seal seating area, and I've wiped that down, making sure that no bits and pieces fell into the fuel. One problem I am having is that the outlet on this fella is different on the new one. As you can see, this is a right angle, this one here is vertical, so I'll have to use the old one. Not sure what it is, a pickup of some description, but I'm happy that I can reuse it. There's no problem with the pipe itself, but clearly that is different, and you know, that won't work, will it? So I'll have to reuse the old one. There's a bit of a boundary that comes along there, likely a baffle of some description. This has to go over the top of it, and that can sit down there nicely onto it. So yeah, just make sure it goes over the top of the baffle there. Make sure it fits in place. Can't see any other reason for it to be there. So I did a little bit off the camera, and I was able to sneak the pump in first and then slide this fella on second, and then that just clipped into place. Reversal of what we did originally, pulling it out. And now this fella here, which goes onto our pump, that clip needs to be removed. It's just a clip for to protect the O-ring in transit. That should push down and, in theory, come out like that. And of course that goes onto this bloke right here. So we carefully pull our pump up a fraction, and we should be able to get this on there somehow. Man, they don't like making things easy, do they, hey? Oh, keep in mind this is meant to go on a right angle one, isn't it? But it should be right. That clipped into place very nicely. There's no kink in the hose, so I'm not concerned about that. Just clipped in just like the other one. The other one went in at a right angle, but I'm not concerned about that. That pump should now go down into our fuel, like that, I believe. That should push down once we get that nice and straight on the tank floor. Look at that, guys. That's correct. I'm happy with that. This little locator goes over this side. You can see it's open here and here. One thing I probably didn't point out is that this seal has a lip on it. So generally speaking, you put the seal on the actual pump flange and then push it down. In this case, if you do that, this lip here will get caught. So what you need to do is put the seal in first, put that lip around the top flange of the tank, make sure it's centered down properly, and then you just wiggle your pump down into that. Look at that. Is that better? I think so. All right, time for our ring to go on next. Remember when I pulled the ring out, I put several little marks on there. There was that arrow one right there, and there was also another one to where to start it. And our starting point is this little bit here. I put a white mark on there. So hopefully that there should, as long as I keep tension on the pump, that there should line up with that fella there. That's my starting point, okay? So now I can spin the ring around like that, get it started, and remember this little arrow here should line up with here, and that should be the correct tension. I might have to go a fraction further because of the thickness of the housing, I don't know. But the main thing is that you go at least to that point. So we'll use our tapping method yet again. Just tap on this side, those little lugs. Might go in there actually. Right, arrow's almost there. And I'll just centre it on that side, make sure that it's across there like that. That looks pretty good, guys. Yep, it's lined up nice now. Our next job is to put our connector back on, our fuel connector. Now I've had that wrapped up in a rag, as you can see, to keep all the dust out. This fella comes off here, slides into place, and we should hear a nice little click, which is great. We've got our clickage happening. Now there wasn't a bung on this one before. I'm not sure if there's meant to be a bung on there or not. I honestly don't know. So I'll just pull it off and have a look inside. There's definitely like a hole going into the fuel tank. So, and that does have, if you have a look in here, you can see that it's flanged. So it's going to allow air to come in, but not dirt, of course. So I might actually leave that fella on there. Our connector goes on next. Now remember, our connector got a little bit dodged here. I had to remove that locking tab because that was just perished by the fuel. I've cleaned it out with some cleaner, some circuit board cleaner, electrical cleaner, and hopefully it should be able to go on there and lock into place. I've put my connector back on, held in place, so that's all done there. Before I put my inspection plate back on, I want to start it, run it for some time and make sure that I don't have any leaks. Don't want a repeat of what's happened before, do we? So I've just let it run there for a little while and make sure that I'm happy with that before I put my cover back on. On the dash there you can see a little fuel level problem there, or fuel pump sign come up. And over here our fuel gauge is not working. Now I've had this before where in this particular case I put the power windows down to get rid of the fuel smell with the fuel pump disconnected, so that's tripped a circuit fault. If we go onto our scan tool there, you can see that we've got a system fault there, fuel pump circuit fault. So I'm just going to erase that and hopefully that sorts that fault out. So we've got rid of our fault code there, but our light is still on and our gauge is not working. I might just turn the ignition off and on, see what happens. The ignition's back on, but it's come up with a tank system malfunction. So I really need to try and find out what the problem is there. Perhaps there's a poor connection at the connector that goes onto the fuel pump itself. Look, the pump's not working for some reason, so I've got my Pico hooked up. I just want to see what sort of signal I'm getting. Now this will be a duty cycle signal, pulsed off and on at a certain rate. So let's see if that actually works or not. At the moment I've got it on channel 1 set on 20 volts plus or minus, and as you can see she's a flat line. So when I turn the ignition on we should see a up and down signal there. As you can see there, we've got a duty cycle. I've been struggling to get this connector to hold into place. It didn't seem to want to click in, and of course that plastic retainer has been broken, so that won't hold in place. Right, so this seal in particular is all swollen because of the petrol, and the locking tab, as you saw, that broke, went to gummy stuff. So I'm going to replace this connector, but they're actually quite hard to find here in Australia. I've pulled this fuel pump apart because it keeps leaking back. It has hard starting issues ever since I fitted this pump. In the meantime, the original pump has been put back in, and as you can see this is probably half an hour's worth. It is holding pressure, not an issue. When I put the replacement one in, the fuel miser one, space of like less than 5 minutes, she was down to 0. I believe the pressure regulator is bleeding off. All I'm going to do is blow in this hose with my mouth, so it's only going to have a couple of psi pressure at the most, and have a look at what happens out the bottom of the regulator there. Now that should be holding pressure. That certainly isn't holding pressure. Shouldn't crack off at like 2 psi, and I'm not blowing extra hard either. So this pressure regulator is causing the hard starting issue because all this accumulator overnight drains out of the regulator here, straight into the fuel tank. And of course this accumulator has no fuel in it in the morning to start the car. So the pump has to pump up here, pump into the pressure regulator, build up the pressure, and then it goes off through here to the vehicle, to the engine. But in the meantime this is bled off overnight. It's a real pain in the bum. I've now got the original pump out, and if we zoom in there a little bit, you can see that the OE, or original equipment that has been fitted, is Continental. OEM means that it's not original equipment, but it's made by the same manufacturer, Continental. Feel pretty confident in this particular pump, a lot more so than our stupid fuel miser piece of rubbish. Yes, I had to wait for about 3 days for it to come from Melbourne, but in this case I've got no choice. There's our pump ready to be installed, together with a nice piece of paper from Continental telling us, see catalogue for use, follow the vehicle manufacturer's instructions, I assume, for installation, install only by trained staff, which is fair enough. I'm trained staff. Anyway, let's install it and see if A, we don't have a leak out the top here, of course, that's a priority, and B, that we don't lose our pressure and the vehicle starts straight away. All I have to do now, hopefully, is open the car door, and I should have some nice pressure, around about 80 to 100 prime pressure, then it'll drop back to about, let's say about 40, 20, something along those lines. But let's see what happens. Okay, I'm just about to open the car door. Let's see what it does. It might take a couple of primes perhaps. In all fairness, it probably had air all through the system, brand new pump and all. Alright, we'll give it one last prime and then we'll try and start it, see what it does. That's looking better, isn't it? Just had a bit of air in the system, needed to be primed. Have a look at that, rock solid folks, rock solid, no issues there. Let's see if it'll start. Just like that. That pressure should certainly be stable as it is. Of course it's going to drop back in time, but look at that, that's 50 psi and that's residual pressure. How do you think it's going to start? Well, because it's got pressure up to the high pressure fuel pump, it's going to start quite easily. There won't be any hesitation or long crank times as the customer experienced before. So I reckon this is done and dusted. I'll put it back together, road test it, and of course we'll see what it's like tomorrow morning. We made it back to the workshop just in time to beat a big storm that's come in. The vehicle is operating correctly as it should do, there's no fault codes and it's starting correctly. So that's solved the issue of the fuel coming out and covering the fuel pump well assembly. If you got something from this video and you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, give it a like, feel free to comment down below. Don't forget about that notification bell. You don't want to miss any future videos. So guys, until next time, this is Miracle Max signing off. I will catch you later.